Barker.
Hello, thank you very much for being here, guys. We realize that this is actually a Quantum Leap convention, therefore a Scott Bakula convention. Clive Barker has made it possible for you to see Scott Bakula on the big screen. I was so happy one day, a couple of months, well actually it was about 7 or 8 months ago, one day I got a call to go to a meeting for a possible short-term job working on a movie, and I went in to meet Clive, who I met for a split second before, and he said, well, I'm bringing the character of Harry Moore to the screen, and we're thinking of casting Scott Bakula, and I said, I gotta have that job, I gotta have it. Right? So let's get a real quick first look. This is a trailer. We have a trailer from Lord of Illusions, which, as Christy just said, it looks now like it may be opening in May. And Clive will talk about it when he comes up here. Let's look at a trailer. Nobody's seen this except for studio people. And then after you've seen it, we will talk to Clive Barker. Thanks. Lights down, trailer out.
Something is watching. Something is listening. Something is coming. See the world realize. What's going on here? Detective Harry Damour is walking a path.
I want you to help me. What is this job, Mr. Damour?
For Olsen. Between you, what can be seen is the line here. I want to know why. I've heard a name. Somebody they talk about in whispers. Who? Nix. And what must be feared? Nix has been buried. What hell is wrong with you people? I think you've seen enough to know that matter. I don't want him getting in front of you. Oh, it's waiting too long. Until the homecoming is spoiled. Every step he takes. Draw the dark side. Go back. Not much. It's your destiny. Accept it. Brings him closer to the truth.
You could get into people's heads. Make them see things. Terrible things.
See, that's his best trick. No illusions, just the truth. Makes his back from the dead. Then he is some kind of a god. In a world where magic is real, death is the ultimate illusion. I was born to murder the world. Are you ready for my wisdom?
It's not real.
Come with me, Damour. I've got so much power to give you. All you have to do is beg. Clive Barker's Lord of Illusions.
Okay. After Mr. Barker has to go, I have a bunch of images from this movie. Don't jump up and run away. We will look at some slides. We will look at some more footage from the film. That's a long time from now, however. Remember that. But in the meantime, may I introduce to the man who's bringing you this movie, Mr. Clive Barker.
The movie is much, much scarier than the trailer. That trailer is what they call a green band in the business, which means that it can be shown with PG or PG-13 movies. That trailer can be seen with The Lion King by innocent children. I'm here to talk about Lord of Illusions and really to answer your questions as much as anything else. I know to many of you I am a Goremeister. I know that you think the idea of Scott being in a movie like this is perhaps slightly strange. I want to tell you that I've been writing about the character of Harry Seymore, that Scott plays in this picture, for 8-9 years. And when we came to cast this picture, and I told Scott this, and I tell you it as the honest truth, he seemed an inevitable piece of casting. That is to say, he seemed close. And when you see the picture, as I hope you will, I think you'll see what I mean. There's a humanity to Scott and a wit to him and a heroicism to him, which is entirely appropriate for this character. He is also, however, a man who has seen very many terrible things. I don't mean Scott, I mean the character. Though it may also be true of Scott. The character of Harry Seymore is a detective, a New York detective, who has been brought into close contact with terrible occult things for all his life. He's been dealing with the darkness in men's souls for many years. And he's dealt with demons, he's dealt with the possessed, he's dealt with exorcisms. There's a line in one of the books that Harry's cases start as divorce cases and end up as exorcisms. And he doesn't like this. It's not a pleasure to him. He doesn't enjoy the idea of being dragged into these terrible things. But fate, maybe something karmic, is telling him that he has to be drawn into the battle against evil. And that he, of course, is always on the side of good. But it's a terrible battle that he wages, and he's done it in many books and several short stories now, and now, hopefully not in one movie, but in several. We showed the movie to an audience on Thursday, and the response was exceptionally good. We were very excited by the response of the audience. Grown men jumped out of their seats and applied to the ceiling. And that's very important. And so and interestingly, for a horror movie, it plays very well to women. Now that's very unusual in horror movies. I don't know if any of you out there have seen the Hellraiser movies for which I am responsible. And I also did some bunch of pictures called the Candyman pictures. Number 2 comes out very soon. And thank you. You were the one. And these pictures are very dark, grim, scary pictures. And I cannot come in front of you right now and say that the same is not true of Lord of Illusions. It is. It is a very dark, gruesome, he said with a smile, a frightening picture. The difference is, and it's a very essential difference between the Hellraiser pictures, the Candyman pictures, and Lord, is that Hellraiser and Candyman, like many of the series, the franchise horror movies that have come up in the last 20 years, are driven by the villains. If you think of a Hellraiser movie, you think of a guy with pins in his head. If you think of a Candyman picture, you think of a 6-foot black guy with a hook in his hand. If you think of Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, you think of the villains. You constantly think of the villains. If you think of alien movies, you think of a big, grey, slimy thing. And what we're trying to do with Lord of Illusions is establish a different tradition. What we're trying to establish is the idea of a series of movies in which the hero is the person that you're going to see. The hero is the guy that you see. And if we think about that for a moment, I don't know if you guys can hear, just as an aside, but it's wonderful, some jolly music. It's like Smurf music. We're talking about demons and things. And, oh my God. Love it. Well, life is made of those counterpoints. There's a philosophical issue here, which is about why we go to these kind of entertainments. And I'd like to just talk briefly about that, and then we'll go to Q&A. Horror movies are a very different kind of entertainment to a comedy, a romance, an adventure movie, in the sense that a horror movie is constructed to make you see something you don't want to see. Okay? A horror movie is a confrontation with something unpleasant. A horror movie is constructed to make you feel fear, to chill you, to upset you. And I have to like that experience. And I think a lot of us do. We like the Halloween fun. We like to go to the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. We like the ghost story told around the campfire. We like to touch those forbidden subjects as long as we know that the environment in which we touch them is safe. And a movie theater, like a television screen, is a safe place to deal with these subjects. And very often they're very dark subjects. It's death and obsession and madness, all the neat stuff, you know. It's really heavy, dark subject matter, but it's done in a form that allows us to touch these things. Stephen King, you may have heard of him, said that horror fiction is a rehearsal for death. Very interesting phrase. He said what the horror author does, or maybe the horror filmmaker, is he takes us by the hand, and he takes us into a darkened room, and he lifts a sheet, and he allows us to touch what's underneath the sheet. And what's underneath the sheet might be very cold and slimy. What's under the sheet may be rather scary. But nevertheless, there's something rather wonderful about doing that forbidden thing, as long as we know somebody's holding our hand. Now, one of the great things about Mr. Bakula is that he will be, figuratively, holding all your hands. And just your hand. Through the Lord of Illusions experience. And that's very important. Now, he doesn't appear for the first 10 minutes of the movie, and the first 10 minutes of the movie are some of the scariest stuff in the picture. So I want you to know, and I want you to spread the word, that when you go to this movie, you kind of have to grit your teeth for the first 10 minutes, okay? Before Scott comes in and takes hold of your hands. And it'll all be fine. But it is a philosophical difference that what we're actually doing with this movie is saying, let's talk about the hero. Let's be in the presence of the hero. Let's not go into this movie and be celebrating death and evil and darkness. Let's be dealing with, and I don't think I'm giving the movie away, with a hero who actually beats the devil in his own game. This is a movie with a hero who succeeds. And I don't think I'm spoiling anything to say that Scott survives the movie. Hundreds of other people don't. This philosophical difference marks for me an important change in the way I hope audiences will view horror movies. This is a horror movie with some, you know, they have these cards that you have to fill in at the end of these screenings. I don't know if you've seen these things, but they have these damn full cards where you have to say, did you think it was entertaining, did you, and so on. And people have to make comments on it. They don't have to, but if they can if they want to. And a few of the comments from last Thursday's screening were very interesting. A couple of them said things like, I had to listen very carefully because there was character and plot. We laugh, and I laugh, but how often you go to the movies and you don't see character and you don't see plot? I guess you guys are not seeing a whole lot of Schwarzenegger pictures, but I'm certainly not seeing them. But when you do see them, you realize the character and plot in action movies and in horror movies are really not terribly important elements of the narrative. What's important is, who's going to get it next, and with which garden implement will they be smashed. And that's not actually terribly interesting, because at a certain point you say, gee, this is just set them up, knock them down, set them up, knock them down. And for me, what drew me to horror fiction and fantasy fiction is actually not dissimilar to what I think draws you guys to Quantum Leap. Oh. Excuse me, what the fuck is that? There is a Korean Valentine's party. What was that?
They're dancing.
I much prefer that to be a Smurf orgy. I want us to believe there are masked blue bodies next door, squirming in unimaginable combinations. We were having such a serious conversation. Oh well, fuck that. We'll talk about something else. Quantum Leap, yes. And I'll be serious for 2 minutes more, and then we can be silly. But the urge to imagine, the urge to enter into a narrative, enter into a story in which fantastical things happen, whether it happened in a fantasy, in a horror fiction, in a science fiction, is something which is very special and, to my mind, very precious. I think what happens increasingly in our society is that we live very narrow, imaginative lives. I think of you guys, like myself, as being pretty unusual in our culture. And it's very important, it seems to me, that you hold on to whatever part of you, whatever part of your imagination brought you to love this kind of stuff. We did this weird thing to kids. At the age of 2 or 3, we introduced them to Oz, and we introduced them to Wonderland, and we introduced them to Never Never Land, and to Narnia, and to all the wonders of fantastical fiction. And we say there are explanations, there's wisdom in these stories. And then at the age of 4 or 5, they have 2 years to wander around this wonderland, and then 4 or 5 just sort of grab them by the neck and say, you know all that neat stuff that you were doing, all those wonderful journeys you were taking, they're not worth a damn. It's time to go to school where you will learn the gross national product of Chile, which will be absolutely no use to you, where you will learn facts and figures, and where the fantasy that you found so vital and so important as a child is invalidated. How often I was told by my mother and father, who I love, but are very pragmatic people, that my dreams would never get me anywhere. That the fantasies that I had were distractions from the business of getting on and living. Whereas I don't think that's the case at all. I think the fantasies that we have as imaginative people are ways that we help understand reality. When Sam Beckett finds himself in another body, finds another series of moral problems and emotional problems to confront and problems to solve, that isn't escapism. It's a beautifully elegant way of talking about things that happen in the real world in a way which is fantastical. Now, I try and do the same thing with dark fiction, I try and do the same thing in my fantasy fiction and in my children's fiction. In other words, even though I come here as the creator of Pinhead and Candyman, I don't think that what brings us to this material is that different. I think we have a lot of passions in common. And now we have Mr. Bakula in common. It looks like we will actually do more Harry Moore pictures. And we did a deal with Scott, which allows him to be available for 3 pitches. We will see how the first one goes. I have a story cooked up in the back of my head for the next one. I think Scott wants to do it in Paris, but I'm not sure that has anything to do with art. I think there's a lot to do with Paris, But Harry should be a character like Sam Beckett who goes from adventure to adventure, problem to problem, and solves them and deals with them and moves on. And in the process of solving them, scares the Jesus out of America. So those are my thoughts. Let's have some questions from the floor. Yes? Can everybody hear? Okay, or just yell. I'll repeat the
I have the
question.
mic up. It's
Oh,
like that.
beautiful. Hey, it's just like the Jerry Springer show.
I've been enjoying your books. I just started reading them actually because of Florida of Illusion. Really, you've hooked me into your style of writing, and I enjoy it. But I also enjoy the character of Harry. Have you ever considered doing a full-length book with all of Harry in there, rather than?
All you ever wanted to know about Harry, right? Do more to Marion. You can have that one. Right. You know, one of the things about writing novels for me is that they sort of dictate themselves. That isn't to say that I sort of sit down there and close my eyes and it sort of just flows out. I wish it were that easy, but it does mean that the narratives are shaped by my subconscious. I keep a dream journal, and many of the images from the books and indeed from the movies come from dreams. And yeah. Well, you know, it might be that my dreams are your nightmares. But the fact is that I planned twice to write a book entirely devoted to Harry, and it's always turned into something else. And Everville, which is the sequel to the Great Secret Show, was supposed to have a lot more Harry in it. And Tesla Bombeck, who was the heroine of that book, just came in there, and I couldn't get her the fuck out of there. It's very strange because I think a lot of it is, I think they're all alter egos. I think these characters are all alter egos in a way. And I think it's where you are in your life, if you see what I mean, that makes you decide to explore this character or that character. A character speaks more loudly to you because your subconscious is saying, I want to talk about this time. Now, I love writing about women. One of the things, I love writing about women who are not doing the standard things that women do in horror and science fiction, which is going to, screen, right, exactly, going to dark, you know. Say again?
Thank you.
Yeah, well, hey, my pleasure. It's fun. I mean, it's real fun. For one thing, women's passion for life, and here's a very interesting thing. Women are much better with dealing with love than men. Much better with dealing with love. And whenever we would have like a bloody scene on the set of Lord of Illusion, the guys were just like, oh God. And I had a wonderful script supervisor, Jane Ann, who would just be right close there. What are we seeing now? And I'm like, are those spurting arteries? And actually, I think that it's about women's bodies. It's about women's relationship to the flesh. It's about how men hold the problems of the flesh at bay, and how men say, I'm armored, I'm severe, I'm not vulnerable. That makes them all the more vulnerable when these things come along. So I love writing about women because women sort of connect with these subjects, and women over and over again in the books stand up to the monstrous and say, you know what, I'm not so scared of you, you're just a guy. You know? And they call the monster on what the monster actually is. You can talk about this forever, but it interests me that most horror fiction is written by men, for men, about men. Right? And actually most science fiction is done the same way. And actually so is most fantasy. I mean, I don't know how many people read Lord of the Rings, but I defy you to find a real woman there. Right? 1,200 pages long, and is there a woman on view? No. There are exquisite creatures that can be put on pedestals, you know, fairy queens that can be worshipped, but is there a real flesh and blood woman who's menstruates and deals with life? No. You know, you can just imagine J.R.R. I mean, would he even use the word menstruate? Oh God, no! You know, and there is, I think a lot of horror fiction is revenge on women. Interesting. A lot of horror fiction deals with the body and the horror of the body because the writers are very afraid of women, which is dumb. Another question. Yes, sir.
Oh, we had a question over here.
Oh, okay.
Back here.
Okay, go at the back there. Okay.
Way over here.
Well,
Way
yes,
back, way back.
whatever. Okay, good.
Okay, Clive, first off, I had no clue you were going to be here. I'm happy, really happy that you are.
Thank you.
Big fan. I've read 2 of your books of blood. Nice and gross. Great. Pelican Hex comic book. Really liked it.
Thank you.
And I'm totally sick twisted purple, so that's why I enjoyed every day. I would really like to know your personal. I've asked many people this, and you're probably the perfect person to ask. And I've read a lot of Stephen King. What is in your opinion, scariest book that you have ever read?
Does it have to be fiction?
It's got to be gross. Something that'll really.
Just go to it.
Really.
You know what? One of the things is that as you get through your life, the things which scare you as a child are not the things that scare you as an adolescent, and so on. So when I was a kid, the first Edgar Allan Poe story I ever read was Mask of the Red Death, which is an extraordinary story. It's 6 pages long and it's terrifying. An amazing story. And that was my favorite thing for like 20 years. And then I read Peter Straub's Ghost Story. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that book. Great book. Great book. One of the great horror novels of our time. And then that was my favorite book. And now, well, Silence of the Lambs is a pretty damn good book. And I actually prefer Red Dragon, which is its prequel. Are you familiar with that book? In which Hannibal Lecter first, eats people. And that's pretty cool. But in terms of the things which really horrify me, and again, to get back to a serious note for a moment, you really can't beat history. It's extraordinary to me how every time I think I've written about the nastiest, darkest, grimmest thing I can imagine, I turn on, PBS. And, you read about some purge somewhere, or you see what happened to the Kurds, or you watch what's been happening in parts of Africa, and everything like on the page just becomes insignificant. And that's really important. My friend Ramsey Campbell is a wonderful horror author. Was once I asked, why, Mr. Campbell, when there is so much horror in the world, do you choose to write about horror? And he said, well, given that you formulated the question that way, why didn't you to ask? And it's completely true. I think when you turn on the news, and it remains terrifying, doesn't it? I mean, how often do you turn on the news and you say, my God, what are people doing to each other? And it seems to me, and I don't think this is just my perception, it seems to me as though we get that in our faces more on the news than we ever did before. That the material that they choose to show, the video clips they choose to show, is stronger and nastier than they ever were before. And there's good and bad about that. I mean, the bad is that you just get inured to it, and it doesn't bother you. And the bad thing is you can sit there with a tray of food while the news is on, and suddenly we're moving from the weather to, some auto crash somewhere, and it's terrible how much we're actually shown. I find reality a lot scarier than anything I can put on the page, I have to say. Who has the microphone now? Yes.
Yeah. I have 1,000 questions, but I'll try to limit myself to 2.
Okay.
Like Martha, many of us, there are a lot of us who have been hooked by the fact that Scott was in the Revolutions and discovered your books. We know about The Last Division and The Great Secret Show and Everville. What other books contain Harry DeMore? And the second question is, do you have a release date for Lord of Illusions?
Do I have a what?
A new release date for Lord of Illusions.
Good.
Yes.
Harry is contained in 2 novels, The Great Secret Show and Everville. And he's contained in The Last Illusion and in a story called Lost Souls, which was written as a Christmas story. I had wanted to do I like writing about Christ. Christ is a very important figure in my life, and I wanted to write about Christ's nativity, and I wanted Harry to be mixed up in a second coming story. And so that story was Lost Souls.
Is it a short story?
It's a short story, and actually we're going to republish it probably at the turn of next year. But at the moment, what I'm doing, partly because of Scott, this is a very interesting thing, there's a kind of footnote to this, but you know, when I write, I have an image of the characters in my head, and now, of course, Harry, once and for all, will always be Scott. Or he will always have Scott's speech rhythms, he'll always have Scott's, the furrow in Scott's brow, he'll always have that little piece of white hair. And so now, Harry has a kind of independent life in my head now. So when I finished making this movie, which is basically done now, I had all this stuff. I had Scott wandering around. I had Scott wandering around my head, only clothed. And I felt. Quote me on that. And it felt to me as though it was time to write more about Harry. And so I'm actually have 2 or 3 stories about Harry, which will now be completely devoted to Harry. Tales of his New York life, and possibly some tales of his early life. I mean, one of the cool things about a character like this is that he sort of has a life of his own at a certain point. And once you start to ask questions about him, and I'll give you an example of this, he has a tattoo on his back, a big blue tattoo, a kind of abstract design. And I don't know where the tattoo came from. I don't know where Harry got it from. All I know is that one day Scott said, "I want a tattoo on my back." And he's coming here tomorrow, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, you should ask him about this, because he read in Everville that Harry has tattoos, and he said, "I want one." And so we designed one in the middle of the night in Venice at 3 o'clock in the morning on the sidewalk in Venice where we were shooting. We designed this tattoo so we had it. It looks amazing. It's really great. And so now I want to write about who did the tattoo on Harry. So I want to write about that. So questions start to get asked about the character that come from decisions which are sort of outside your control almost. It's a very interesting process. As far as the release date is concerned, we screened the picture Thursday. We had an amazing response. The studio heads came away with big smiles on their faces and promised that next Tuesday, 4 days from now, they would confirm the dates. And I say confirm because it does look like it will be the beginning of May. The thing is that it's a very crowded time at the moment. There are new movies all the time. We want to make sure this picture gets out in a window where it has a chance and it isn't up against, Die Hard 3, which is also May. So we have to be sort of out before Bruce. Because Scott's a better actor than Bruce.
We have one over here.
Oh, okay. Yes, good. At the back?
I was just wondering if you were aware of Scott from Quantum Leap. Is that where you knew about him?
Yes, I in truth only knew him from Quantum Leap. I had never seen Necessary Roughness because it had balls in the poster. Say again?
Were you a fan of Quantum Leap?
I had only seen it when I got over here. I never saw it in England. In fact, it only went to England when I left. It's only just established itself over there. But yes, I was a fan, and I liked the humanity of it, and I liked the humanity that he brought to the role. I liked the fact that he was such an accessible, likable character who made, as an actor, incredibly brave choices. I mean, it takes a lot of, balls to actually, get dressed up in drag or, do that, on primetime television. I mean, playing a New York detective who deals with demons is nothing by comparison with what was done in Scott's guy. Yes, there was something. Yes, sir.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, as far as casting Scott, did you cast him purely after seeing his work and then saying, I want him, or did he have to come in and audition first?
No, somebody of Scott's caliber doesn't audition.
Right, that's what I thought.
He came in, we sat down, and this is truthfully the way it happened. We sat down, we talked, I told him about the character. I said, after 20 minutes, I said, I want you to do this picture. He said, I never did this before. I never went into movie direction. Somebody after 20 minutes said, they wanted to do it. Are you serious? I said, sure, let's do it. And we did the deal.
One more quick one. I haven't read any of the books that...
Doesn't mean you're a bad person.
About Harry, but if I was to read just one of them, now that I know it's May, I got some time, but if I was to read just one of them before the picture, which one do you suggest?
Well, you could start with the short story, The Last Illusion,
okay.
which upon which this movie is based, which is a nice introduction to Harry. He comes out of a whole detective tradition, Hammett and Chandler and, Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, all these hard-boiled detectives who have seen the dark side of the world and managed to keep their morals intact. Who has the microphone? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been listening to you talk and everything. I've never seen one of your movies already in your books. I might start that now. But if someone came to you and asked you to do a Quantum Leap movie, which everyone here wants, would you do it?
It would need to be a massively expensive movie. I know what? I've been talking about doing some science fiction for United Artists. And because I've enjoyed doing some horror, but I want to do some science fiction next. And the thing is, for me, if you're going to do a movie of something, if you're going to turn a very successful TV series into a movie, you've got to have a really special story. And one of the things that has always bothered me about Star Trek movies is that, with the exception of maybe two of them, that it doesn't seem like it was worth telling the story. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the first Star Trek picture, why did we need that tale to be told? And so it always comes down to the story. If somebody was to come and say, listen, we have a story that's really worth telling, as opposed to just going out and making a few bucks, because I actually have, more often than not, hated the movies that were made from television material. I mean, the Addams Family movies, the Flintstones. You have to have something that will make the quantum leap. You have to have something that will go one step further. And if that was in the air, then I wouldn't be against that idea at all. It just needs the right story, as always.
Okay, we have one in the front row.
Okay.
Hi, Clive. I was just wondering, when you were on the set with Scott, was there anything that he was squeamish about, or anything that he thought?
That Scott was squeamish?
Right. The horror stuff?
Oh, no. No, not a chance. No, this man, no. He gets pretty bloody in the picture, and I think so. He's great with the stunts. He did a lot of his own stunts. And got pretty bashed around doing it, I have to say. I mean, pretty bruised and battered by the end. And he does some pretty amazing things in the picture. I mean, flings himself all over the set and gets his hands into the muckiest stuff and bleeds and is beaten up and kicks people and kills people, and, and he just went for it. I mean, he is he likes getting in there. I think some of that, by the way, and this is very good for a director because he's directed, as you know. And so I think he has a real sense of the community of filmmaking that actually a film set actually is. A film set isn't Napoleon and a bunch of underlings, which is so often the image that you get. A film set is a bunch of people trying to do their damnedest in the face of an oncoming train. And one of the cool things about Scott was that because he directed before, I think he knew that there were times when he just needed to get stuck in and do it. And it made it much simpler for me. We have a huge picture in terms of the scale of the Should we leave?
What'd you jump for? Can't let me turn it off?
Yeah. Everybody just remain calm till we find out what's going on. Okay, we have one more question over here. I think I've lost her.
I have to go in about 3 minutes. So let's.
Okay, let's make this a quick question.
One question.
Hi, Clive. Scott's had some measure of success in feature films, but do you think that this will launch him into superstardom?
I have to tell you, if it doesn't, there's no justice. So much of it is in the hands of, frankly, you guys, and of hopefully millions of other people who say, gee, cool, Clive Barker, Scott Bakula, some neat stuff, let's go see it. Scott has so many qualities that are shared by far inferior performers, and it's very frustrating to see a man of his talent not being, the name above the marquee. And we all know, we could all name them, but we're not going to because we're polite people. The people who have got the names above the marquee and could not act their way out of a damn paper bag. Did any of you see Speed? I mean, geez. And so, but a lot of it is about the audience response. As you say, last Thursday, the audience response to Scott was superb. They laughed at the jokes, they were scared when he was in jeopardy, they marked him excellent in terms of the performance all the way down the line. He got great marks. So my hope would be that he gets the rewards that he justly deserves, but that his price doesn't go up so much. I have to go. I really thank you for this warm welcome. I know I must have seemed like an oddity on the schedule here. Terry has got some slides to show you, and I hope very much that we will have a date for you guys, which, everybody at the convention leaders will know a day after we know it. So I'll make sure that, the word gets passed around via the internet or whatever, as soon as United Artists have given us the date. And I hope that you all have a wonderful time at the picture, and that, you know, we get to do this, use and use, at the next convention. Thank you so much.
Right over, everybody. Thank you, Clive. All right, Clive Barker. Actually, the truth is, he doesn't have to leave. He just wants to go sit in the back and look at the pictures of Scott that we're going to show on the screen. I have a bunch of slides here which we're going to look at, and then we've got a bunch of footage from the movie that we're going to look at. So if you're interested, hang around. Actually, I say it's footage from the movie. It's all footage from the movie and a little bit of behind the scenes that was put together specifically to be shown at conventions, and it's been shown at a couple already, so it's not exclusive here, but it's well worth seeing. And I think you'll enjoy the slides. Some of them have not been seen in the magazines. Regarding the release date of the movie, the studio always intended February 17th to be the release date of Quantum Leap, simply because, excuse me, of Lord of Illusion. And whoever asked the Quantum Leap question, is it going to be a Quantum Leap movie? Wouldn't that be a good idea? We talked about that for years. The reason they chose that date for a couple of reasons. Historically, it's been very good for scary films, and Clive's favorite recent movie, Silence of the Lambs, opened on that date. But with Candyman 2 and Hellraiser 4 opening at the same time, and then other movies like In the Mouth of Madness and such, which people would think are in the same genre, all opening at the same time, the studio decided to move it backwards a little ways, giving Clive time to take the picture in and do some more tweaking. And I was on the dubbing stage with him the other day, and he was listening. He had two shots that he was looking at. To me, sounded perfect. And he said, no, we got to fix this. No, we got. I don't know what he was listening to. No, I didn't. But he's tweaking, and I'm kind of glad it didn't open yesterday, because now we still have that anticipation. Are the slides ready? Turn that on and see if we can get that first one to go. Okay. It's up on top. Shall I come up there and... Hang on a second, I'll be right back, everybody.
It's alright, my fault. I should have my feet out there.
All right. This shot was taken 4 days before we started actual photography on the movie, which was way back in October someplace, right? No. When we ended in October. When was it then? It was in July. We started shooting in July. 4 days before photography started, we had a makeup test, and our still photographer came over. He was anxious to get work, and he hadn't worked for a while. And he came over, shot a bunch of pictures, and we stood there beside each other and took some shots. And they turned out to be tremendously useful. We would not have had these pictures, but for that day of makeup test. So this was taken actually on a Thursday before we started shooting the movie the following Monday. So this is a pre-production shot, unanticipated. Turn the slide if you will, thanks. Okay, here's Clive Barker. I actually assembled these slides to show at an event when I had the actor with the shaved head with me. So this maybe are out of order, then I would have put them for you guys. But I thought we have a joker in the audience. Some of the characters. That's Clive, obviously, in the middle, looking very much like his villains. The character on the far side, on your left of that picture, is a character named Butterfield. He's a cultist, a lot of cultists in this film, whose main intention, along with his buddy, who on this side, an actor by the name of Jordan Martyr, that's Barry Sherman, this is Jordan Martyr playing a character named Ray Miller. Their job in this world is to destroy Scott Bakula, okay? And there's Clive Barker in the middle, directing them straight towards that. Okay, turn the slide if you will. All right. Lord of Illusions actually starts out, if you don't want to know about this, yell at me and I'll stop giving you details, okay? Lord of Illusion starts out, at the very beginning, we're 13 years before present time. We're looking at a character by the name of, his name is Swan, S-W-A-N-N. We will meet him later in the movie as a magician. He and his friends are out in the desert trying to rescue a 12-year-old girl who's been kidnapped by a cult. And, turn the slide if you will. The actor is played, the Swan, the character, is played by Kevin J. O'Connor. You probably know him. He was a beatnik in Peggy Sue Got Married, remember that? And he was recently in The Color of... what was the name of that picture again that you saw? And which came out, by the way, during the making of Lord of Illusions, and Scott and Kevin were both disappointed that the movie didn't work and glad that nobody saw it. And yeah, Kevin was in Birdland. Here he is subduing the cult leader. Now, when we say cult leader, you can think something in the line of Charles Manson, that sort of thing. And one of the odd things that happened while we were shooting this film, we're shooting a movie about cultists. We have cultists all over the stage, you know, special effects, makeup, and all of that. And suddenly the headline in the newspaper was, this group of cultists suddenly were found murdered across Canada and Sweden, is that what it was? Switzerland. And it happened when it said it. Clive just kind of stopped and said, nothing I write can be as real as reality, you know? Turn the slide if you will. What Swan is doing to this man is he puts a magical mask on his face to prevent him from continuing with the types of activities that he's doing that I'm not telling you about. All right, turn the slide if you will. All right, jump forward 13 years. That was in California. We're in New York City. There's a down-and-out detective by the name of Harry D'Amour, and he is, how many zine stories are they're going to show up in the next few weeks with the title D'Amour de Maree, right? I can see them all happening now. Magazines, these fanzines are all going to be competing with one another with the best story with that title. One of his employers comes in. He's a freelance detective, and one of his often employers comes in and says, I want you to check out this little fraud case, trail this guy. The guy gets on an airplane and flies to Los Angeles, California. Turn the slide. Okay? There's Clive directing a scene that sets up how Harry D'Amour gets involved with this cult. There's a fortune teller by the name of, what was his name? Joseph Lattimore is the actor. Characters are leaving me already. He's just been murdered by having 14 scalpels stuck into his body. All right? And when Scott told you about this tattoo that Harry has on his back, we were shooting on Venice, just a couple of blocks from the ocean on Venice Boulevard. And in the middle of the night, it was an all-night shot. When you see the movie, there's a character gets thrown out of a window and lands down on the street, and the police come up and such like that. And that's where, between a couple of shots, Scott and Clive went down and literally kneeled on the sidewalk with a sheet of paper, actually a script, and I think, or maybe it was production notes, and on the back of it, Clive started drawing pictures as Scott was saying, no, I think it should be like that. And we all kind of gathered around and watched, and they were drawing this odd picture, and nobody knew what it was really. And the next time we saw Scott with his shirt off, there it was, drawn on his back. It was attached to what is this scene, actually. Turn the slide. Okay. Harry discovers that this fortune teller who he saw get murdered, because it was tracing this petty fraud guy who walked into that fortune telling office, is a friend of this magician, and he actually at the funeral, he meets this woman who comes and talks to him because she's worried about her husband, and she's heard that he's a detective. Somebody pointed him out as like, this guy doesn't belong at our funeral. And they start talking, and she said, why don't you come and see my husband's act? He's a magician, and he's got something new going on. Why don't you come and see him? So we shot this at the Pantages Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Turn the slide if you will. Were any of you in that scene? We had some fans in the in the audience at the Pantages? Nobody here. There's Kevin J. O'Connor playing the character Swan. On stage, turn the slide if you will. Gigantic magic show. This is the opening. He floats through the air in a sarcophagus, which you see here in bright red. Now think of these colors. What else is red in Clive Barker movie? There's a gargoyle demon in the background. There may be other demons in the movie. Turn the slide once again. You notice on the posters and maybe on some T-shirts and things that there's this image of all of these knives. Have you guys seen that? These swords falling in the footage that Clive showed. Clive, for a long time, for years, has had in his head this picture of a tarot card. It's actually the Ten of Swords, and it's a dead body laying with all these swords sticking through it. And that's the one image that from the time he started writing Lord of Illusions, he went through 4 drafts over a 2-year period, and he always had that image of this tarot card. So nobody really knew why, but it's the one thing that never ever got changed, this tarot card scene. In this magic show that we see at the beginning of the movie, here's Swan, the magician, spinning on a wheel, and overhead in the middle are 10 swords hanging, and the swords start to drop one at a time. Turn the slide. And the show goes very, very wrong. And Harry is a witness to this apparent murder, this death, an accidental death. But Harry, being a detective and being a skeptic, and being a New Yorker just arrived in Los Angeles, you know how they question us anyway, he looks around and he says, wait a minute, something odd is happening here. I should tell you about the other people in this picture. The young lady that you see in the middle is Famke Janssen. Those of you who did watch Star Trek The Next Generation may remember her as the perfect mate, the most beautiful woman in the universe, who was supposed to be kept away from anyone because she would bond with the first man that she met, and then Picard very wisely takes her off to his waiting room, Right, That's Famke. As Dorothea Swan, suddenly apparently a widow. And since we shot this movie, when Famke finished shooting this movie at the beginning of October, had a 1-week vacation and flew off to England for an audition, and was cast in the role of this next Bond girl opposite Pierce Brosnan in the film that's going to be called GoldenEye. Right, so she will just be on screen with this while she's beginning to film that. So her career is breaking. Turn the slide, please. So Scott goes downstairs in the Pantages Theater. It literally is called the Pantages in the film. And downstairs he runs into these 2 guys who, their third partner that we saw a little while ago, Clive Barker, just left. And they don't like Harry. They didn't want to see Swan die. And they think maybe Harry knows why he died. And they don't like him. And those looks on their faces are aimed directly at your buddy, Scott Bakula. Okay, turn the slide if you will. The key thing about this picture is that early on in the film, Scott loses his shirt. And I swear it takes forever for him to get it back on again. It's just amazing. But here he is looking at the corpse of the magician Swan, with others looking on him aghast that he's sticking his hands into this corpse. Turn the slide if you will. See, he can't get his shirt back on. And this is a different scene. Turn the slide, please. All right. We go out into the desert where originally, remember 13 years earlier, Swan, as a young man, buried this now masked cult leader. Obviously, the villainous looking fellows that we've seen, Butterfield and Miller, are cult members who over 13 years have become adults instead of the teenagers that they were. Turn the slide. And they don't like Harry anymore. Harry and Dorothea have a hard time fighting them out in the desert, but they're investigating Swan's death, and they keep finding clues that take them into more and more remote areas and into bloodier and bloodier situations. Turn the slide. Okay. You saw this character standing in the coffin room a little while ago. This is the fellows from K&B makeup, special effects makeup here in town, taking care of him. Butterfield takes after him in the scalpel. Remember the scalpels in the fortune teller's chest a while ago? Clive Barker likes scalpels. Turn the slide. Okay. This is Clive okaying some makeup that he said, nobody's going to see that until the movie's open, but here it is. I remember on the set he said, I never want to see that on television. Well, we're going to put it on television. Clive literally supervised every single iota of everything. He was so detail-oriented on the film, and yet every minute has that smile that you just saw. That's just the way he always was every day on the set. It was great. Turn the slide if you will. The character is Nix, that you just saw, the cult leader. These are some of his cultists. Turn the slide again. Having a good time at one of their little playtimes out they have a house still out in the desert. Turn the slide if you will. Okay? But of course, maybe they don't have such a good time. This is a wonderful scene that we shot, which involves people sinking in mud, and in order to shoot it, there was only one way to do it, so they sunk in mud. We had 14 actors who, at least 5 times apiece, had to sink into the mud. And the young lady that you see in the middle, the first one, actually, there was the first picture of a bloody person just 2 slides back. She's right there in the center. Her name is Barbara Patrick, and her husband, Robert Patrick, played the second Terminator. Remember him, the guy that Arnold couldn't kill? And finally did, I guess. Or didn't. She told us one day that she got home from the set, she took a shower. Before she went to bed, she took a shower. She woke up in the morning and her bed was full of sand. So it was a bad time for those guys. Turn the slide if you will. Dorothea, of course, finds herself in need of protecting herself because Harry doesn't seem to be succeeding, and maybe she even has to protect him a little bit. Turn the slide. Butterfield. This actually is a shot of a burn. There are some creatures who seem to appear in the picture, and one of them takes after Butterfield. Oddly enough, there's something very interesting about this shot that is more than a horror picture. Tom Rainoni was the special effects coordinator on the picture. He brought all of the effects companies. We had 11 different effects companies working on the film. 5 of them in, 2 of them in special effects makeup, 2 of them in computer graphic CGI houses, and the rest of them doing things like, there was an effects house that made a bunch of weapons, tools, like the one that he's holding. And Tom had to put all of those effects companies together, and he designed these burns after the actual look of a fellow. He said when he was a kid in Texas, he went to a grocery store, and the guy that bagged the groceries had elephantitis, and he looked like this, except that his skin wasn't red. So this is actually our special effect coordinator's tribute to a young man that he knew 20 years ago in Texas who actually looked like this. So one of those things. Turn the slide if you will. The dead cult leader, after 13 years underground, comes back and starts to reveal who and what he really is. A creature sprung from the mind of Clive Barker. Turn the slide. His name is Nix. He has a lair with Clive Barker paintings all over the walls, and an uncanny ability to do things like float and fly and other stuff. Turn the slide, please. And to capture Dorothea in order to draw Harry to Moore. Turn the slide. That particular day, whatever it is, corn syrup and red food coloring, all of that, they told Famke that they were going to pour 6 gallons of this liquid over her body. They did it a number of times. Nobody told her. At the end of the day, they had used over 50 gallons of salt. Okay? It was funny, too, because when she left the set, they did it a number of times. The first time she left this, actually the first time it didn't quite get on her enough, so they just kind of rubbed her down and wiped her down and then shot again. And then she was so covered, she was so red that she had to leave the set and take a shower and come back and do it again. And as she walked off the set, she left red footprints, perfect footprints of her all the way across the length of the soundstage down this hallway and into the dressing room area. And it was longer than the length of this room, maybe half again from where I'm standing to that back wall. And whatever it was sunk into the cement, and today it's still there. In Culver City, it's a little soundstage called SIR, and it's on the side. This is very funny too. The building that we shot this movie, the majority of the movie in, is 50% of a big industrial block building. It's all put together. It's a real nice soundstage, but behind that wall, like where the music's coming from, are the head offices of C&R Clothiers in Culver City. Okay, turn the slide. Okay, I think this is it. Clive Barker and Scott Bakula together. Now, Clive just told you that he has other Clive Barker stories. Scott has a 3-picture deal. Clive was describing the stories as Harry's a New York character, so we'd like to see Harry D'Amour in New York. And he has, when he was saying Scott wants to go to Paris, Clive actually has a Harry D'Amour in Paris story. And if Clive doesn't come up with some wonderful things that he doesn't already have in his brain, those seem to be the 2 areas that the next 2 pictures could be in if this picture sells some pigs, but you never know, right? Turn the slide. Is there anything else up here? Yeah. Like I said, he just can't get his shirt back on. Okay. All right. I think go ahead, turn off the slide, knock that down, and just plug in that reel, that longer. There's a 5-minute and 29-second reel that will look at some more footage from this movie, and then we can all happily go home, I guess. Somebody said something about some posters or something we're going to play with? Want to do that first, or? I know it's in here. Of course, they always force us to put these on. Say, don't give me the warning. I'm not going to broadcast it. I'm just going to take it down to the convention and show the reel. Here it comes. Sound. Sound. Sound.
Okay, I'll rewind it.
Sound. Thank you.
And I am the writer director of this picture, The Lord of Illusions. And action! This is a movie about the difference between illusionists and magicians. The difference between somebody who is making it look like magic.
I've seen the lines. So what is magic?
And somebody who's actually performing it. One of the things that a narrative of this kind requires is somebody that the audience can completely believe in and trust to take you on this journey. Fate has chosen Harry.
Harry's a detective from New York City, private eye. He's a guy who
gravitates toward the more bizarre kind of cases.
I can't help you unless you talk to me.
Can't help me.
You don't know that.
He's one of the guys who's out there watching the dark side and stepping into it sometimes and extricating himself. He's one of the watchers.
Have you seen this before?
He's an interesting combination for me because he's both a detective. He comes out of the pulp, film noir, detective movie tradition, that whole thing. But he also has his feet and his hands deep into horror territory.
Want a date?
Elements of this narrative grow organically out of the detective elements. Cast of a good hero is how bad the villain is.
He's a villain unlike a lot of the classic horror villains that we've seen in the last few years, in that he is much more he works much more from a mental place, which to me makes him much more interesting, which makes him also potentially much more dangerous.
I think it's kind of scary that way. That you're in a real world, and Harry's in a real world dealing with very real and troubled people. And that journey, that investigation, takes him into extraordinary places and extraordinary confrontations, but they're no less real for that.
Oh, I know what you want.
Yeah, I think we are going to put on screen some things that nobody's ever seen before. And action! Really extraordinary images.
How you doing, Keith?
We're all afraid some of the time. And isn't it reassuring to get into a cinema with 500 other people and be afraid together and laugh and clap and shudder and jump, and then when the whole movie is over, see the credits roll and say, well, I took the ride, I survived the ride, next.
Thank you very much. Now, I realize this, once again, you're going to have Scott Bakula over here tomorrow afternoon, I believe. And this is all about how wonderful Quantum Leap was and how wonderful Sam was in Quantum Leap. I love Sam. But this is one more episode, okay? Thank you very much.
Oh, no, not again! God, not again!
Talking about stereo, man.
This is fun.
This is what we see when Lisa's car crashes. Take one.
Oh, God, not again. Not again.
She deserved it.
They should have made that episode. They really should have made that episode. Are you ready for the next guest panel? All right, we have some wonderful stars to introduce to you coming up next. Well, right up front, we'll tell you that Lera Olsen, the now very Americanized Machko, is going to be a little late today, but we will bring her on stage as soon as she arrives. But right now, waiting in the waiting room to see you is Maree Cheatham of Margaret Twilly of Play Ball, Renee Colman, Aaliyah, the evil pearl, and Carolyn Seymore, the equally evil hologram, who is also the shady Mrs. Olsen, Professor Brian, Susan French, Miss Melanie of Color of Truth, and Lera of Twilight Starlight, Rich Whiteside, Doc of the Leap Home Vietnam, and Shadow of the Leap Lisa. One moment, please. I'm sorry, Anne Lockhart won't be with us this afternoon. Her children are unwell and she can't attend. Sorry. Anne Lockhart.
We didn't have my photo.
She was in the
Thank you for indulging me on that tape there. I've always gotten requests for those two, so I couldn't resist sneaking them in. My kind of odds. I like this.
You should be in the middle.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to open this one up to questions and answers. We'd like for you to raise your hand. We have a microphone in both sides of the theater. We'd like for you to raise your hand so we can come to you with the microphone. So not only will the guest hear the question, the audience will also. Please try to stay in your seats taking photographs because it's kind of distracting to everyone else if you can. We urge you to do that. Should we open up the question with what's everybody doing now? Go on down the panel.
All right, shall I go first?
Sure.
My name is Maree Cheatham. Can you hear me? Okay, good. And I am now the lady in Muscle. It's a new show on Warner Network. How many of you get the Warner Network where you are? Oh my gosh, that's a lot of people. Oh, that's good. Well, it's a Muscle is set in a gym, and there isn't anybody over 30 in the show. And I'm the lady with the token over 30 in the show. And I get picked up by the Italian gigolo, who decides that he's really in love and can't continue to be a gigolo. So I continue to send him little gifts while he's in, like he's moved in with his love. And I sent him a racehorse the other day. So that's what I'm up to. And I'm opening at a play at the Victory Theater in April. How many of you live here in town? Oh, cool. Oh, wonderful. Well, come to the Victory Theater after April the 4th, and you'll see a very funny play. Okay. What's it called? Oh, it's called Catch a Falling Star. And it's at the corner of Victory and Hollywood Way. Oh, great. Yes.
I'm Renee Colman. I just finished doing Diagnosis Murder with Dick Van Dyke. It was just on, I think, 2 weeks ago.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm just going off on Wednesday this week to go up to Vegas to do a show. It's also I believe on the Warner Network called The Watcher. So I play a prostitute.
She can't say the word.
I play a prostitute who falls in love and decides to no longer be a prostitute. So that's what I'm doing. And after that, I'm going off to Poland for 6 weeks. I'm shooting film over in Poland. I play a woman named Callahan, O'Callahan, who worked for the Lech Walesa PR campaign during the Solidarity movement, getting him elected for president. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, I'm right now in rehearsal for a play of the Tobacco Road, where I am disguised as a very, very old woman. And a few months ago in Florida, I made a film, movie of the week for ABC called Relative Family Reunion or Relative Nightmare. And there again, I am disguised as a very, very old woman. My family are celebrating my 100th birthday, and I don't like my family very much. I get very tired of all this hoopla over my 100th birthday, so I run away. And I steal hot air balloons because one of the children like very much and just go off. And they spend the rest of the film hunting for me. Now that's supposed to come out in, was to come out Christmas time. They're having some editing trouble, I think. And now they're saying it'll come out in April.
But I can't compete with hot air I've just done, just before Christmas, I did an episode of Voyager, and now the captain gets bored and they want to go and play on the holodeck. And she conjures up me sometimes, and I'm apparently going to come back quite often just to give her, somebody to get her teeth into soon. And before that, I did a funny little thing for a friend of mine. It's a Russian ballet madame, which is very grand and high opera with sort of enormous turbulence and awful astrakhan. I made them give me fake astrakhan because I won't wear it real fun. So that's my political agenda. And then after all that, I was going to do a play, but I don't think I am going to do it because I've got to move house and everything, so I should be busy for a little while doing that. And that's basically it. Not too busy. But we are always asking for a little more help. Yeah, so just send a prayer out there and say, give Carolyn some work. It will be. Thank you.
Floor to questions for the panel. If you don't, I'll ask another one.
Renee, how was it to rub all that chest hair?
Carolyn was telling me that he did an issue of Playgirl recently, which I missed. So if any of you have it, it was delicious. Delicious.
Did you rub his chest hairs too?
What went on behind the scenes? Before the rehearsal, what were the rehearsals?
Actually, Scott's a very happily married man, and it made him incredibly nervous. And I had to be really forward in that scene because I'm really trying to seduce him. And poor Scott was just like tongue-tied and hemming and hawing and humming. And I was just like, I'd sort of like, push the envelope a little bit farther. I'm getting paid for this.
I think we must have played the same scene.
Does anyone else have some great stories from your episode?
Well, when I did the same scene. I attacked Scott and ripped his shirt off and threw him down on the desk and had my way with it. But before we did that, I'd never been introduced, and I said, look, I am so terribly sorry. It was the 1950s show, and I was wearing a dress that sort of came mid up here, and the producer came in and said, well, let's get some cleavage on this one, right? So they took me off to wardrobe and cut the dress down, and I was showing a great deal of bosom when I came back, and I went up to Scott and I said, now wait a minute, this is our first scene together. We've never been introduced, and I have to push my bosoms up again. In just a moment, hello, my name is Maree Cheatham. How do you do? He said, my name is Scott Bakula. All right, roll up, Right on the old desk. It was great.
Any other stories on the panel? Want to share?
He's a grand kisser.
All right.
Any questions from the audience? Oh, yes.
I think it's Miss French, right? You're wonderful, for one thing, in Somewhere in Time. And I've also seen you in many skits, horror kind of things like Tales of the Crypt and stuff.
What did you say?
You've been in a lot of horror, small skits, like Tales of the Crypt, that sort of thing.
No, I didn't ever do Tales of the Crypt.
Well, I know I've seen you in some horror stuff.
Yes, so I'm around some.
How did you feel about Mr. Bakula?
He was a joy, absolute joy. I did have a funny experience. As you know, he played a black man in that. And he has to see himself in a mirror. And he's in the car, he's driving the car, and he sees himself in the mirror as black. And I had to somehow climb up, and then he sees me too. So I had to climb up on the man who was playing Scott, the black man, and I had to sit on his back, up on his shoulders, and all around him, so that we could get the two faces together. So I was sort of like a pony, you know. And he was a very serious man. And I was very serious. I was afraid I was going to get giggles. Encasing him, you know, and I thought that was well, not the best time I had on
Miss French, let me just say that I loved you as Miss Melanie. Soon after that, I saw driving Miss Daisy, and I was just in pieces. And Miss Cheatham? Yes. You really had your way with him, didn't you? Yes.
I did. There was a little pig on that show. It was the mascot of the ball team. And that was a very funny little pig. It kept doing naughty things, which we would then step in. I took a picture with that pig. It's one of my favorites.
Okay, now, this is going to be for Renee and also Carolyn. You know, I really enjoy working with you both on the show Deliver Resident Evil, Quantum League. And I've tried to be honest that you two are the greatest, loveliest people on that show. I really have a lot of emotional feelings. You know, and I just love you both. You know, you were excellent. I enjoyed watching Renee telling them the evil they both. I think that was had to be a dramatic, wonderful scene. And also, Carolyn, you really did a fantastic job. I'm really pleased. And I think you have grown a lot. And so has Renee, and you both have changed so very, very much. And today I can see, like, in this rich world that you both have come and really make one very special person a very happy one.
Hey.
I can shout. I think everybody can hear. My question is for everyone on the panel. How does your experience on Quantum Leap compare with the other things that you have done? And Rich, how do you feel with all those ladies around you?
nicest working experiences I've ever had. They treated me very well. They were all terribly polite. I looked down one time and saw Scott pick up a lot of cable and help the electricians walk off with it. One time we were sitting in the sun at the ballpark, and he came over and said, "I don't think anyone has released you from this shot." He said, "Ladies, we're going forward. Consider yourselves released." He was really so sweet to us all. That's unusual.
Carolyn, what you were a holodeck? You're on the holodeck for the Voyager, correct?
Yeah.
And you were a hologram. So what did that make you?
A woman of
getting
little unknown
typecasted?
substance.
When you're shooting that scene, are you shot behind a blue screen?
No, not on the holiday.
No, on Quantum.
Oh, absolutely.
So are you seeing a video of what the scene is that you're supposed to be reacting to? How do you do that?
With difficulty, but no, you're not. It's quite complex. I mean, and there's a whole routine. You can't go too fast. You can't go too. You have to retain a lot of information, which at some points is difficult. But it's difficult to do. But I don't remember that we had a video. I don't think I had a video for my stuff. But I know that I think Scott did for some of it. I'm not sure, but I think he did it. It's a very complex thing to do. And you can only go, you can't move very much because you're within the frame of the window. So it's quite complex. You never had to do that?
Yeah.
I thought you just followed me. I opened the door.
It's always too short.
Sorry, we're having trouble with that microphone. I'll be right there. Thank God I go to aerobics every day.
Just speak right in.
Renee?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I guess my question is first to you and then to the rest of the panel. I recognize you from A League of Their Own, which is one of my favorite movies. And I wondered if you or anyone else had anything else you could run to the video store to see you in or anything like that. I mean, have you done the other feature films?
Yeah, I just finished. I just finished a film this past summer called Waiting for Michelangelo, which hasn't even been released yet. And a film before that called The Garden of Eden, which is making the circuit, which is a Mexican film, and it's making the circuit of sort of art house films. Most of the films that I do are not like A League of Their Own. They're much more sort of artsy, craftsy. They're much smaller, much more of that. But I did a film many years ago. I had a small part in it called Who's Harry Crumb?
Oh yeah.
And you can get that in the video store. And I did a film called Anna, which is also another art house Polish film, but I'm part of that as well. And other ones, but again, I don't know that you know them because they're all sort of very, the kind of films you go and drink cappuccino at and pretend you can speak French, You focus in on a teacup for half an hour and you go, oh, that was brilliant. Those are the kind of films that I do.
I'm fine.
Chico? We need to hear some back-scene story from you. From everyone else. Any funny back-scene story you might have about your episode?
Oh, gosh. Let me think.
Doesn't have to be funny, just dirt. We want dirt.
Well, there's a scene where Machiko takes off her shirt and hangs it up on the clothesline, if you remember. And the Reverend and
mother-in-law and assorted others show up in their shock beyond words to see her topless. And I got home, and my husband and I were watching the show, and he is the pastor of a youth group. And a few of the high schoolers had come over to our house, and so Machiko hangs up the clothes and turns around, and everyone turns away from the television and looks at me. And I said, I had a stunt person. And she had green fingernails. So. Is that what you had in mind?
Well, not quite, but that's good.
Oh, and also, just following that scene, one of the other actresses, we were all, supposed to act shocked and horrified that we're in this horrible situation. And one of the actresses, I won't say who, actually flashed the others of us who were on camera at the time. So there was a little bit of funny stuff going on.
Earlier we had heard that practical jokes get played amongst the crew.
Sounds like a fire alarm from yesterday.
Does practical jokes get played amongst the crew and on some of the guest stars at times? Were any of you privy to them or preyed upon that you would cheer?
No, I think throwing him on the desk and having my way with him was practical.
Dean was always being picked on with tape balls, and so he tried to employ me at one time to be his personal bodyguard. Seek revenge on all those. I told him we put together a little assassin squad.
Rich, this is a question for Mr. Whiteside. Those of us on Genie know about what Good Morning Darling is. Matter of fact, I think it was the first question I ever asked you. I would like to know if you'd like to explain to everybody else in the room what a Good Morning Darling is.
Oh. Watch the tapes from Indie League. I demonstrated it there.
Well, what is it?
He's blushing.
It's a SEAL's perverted name to an exercise that we do every morning, especially in basic training. And that Don used in the Vietnam episode. At least referring to that, Good Morning Darlings is a warm-up. It's usually a stretching exercise after certain special stomach exercises. Let's put that. I can't demonstrate it here. I don't have the facilities. I'm going to get up on a chair again and do all that. It's an exercise. And we have, when I went to Bud's training, we had an obstacle called the dirty name, because what it was is you had to jump off on this log that was about 8 feet off the ground. You had to crawl on top of that and jump up to another log that was 6 feet above that, and if you fell off, you had to start over again. And so everybody kept cursing at it, so they called it the dirty name. And so in any case, I don't have anything else to say on that. Maybe in private I'll show you.
We've heard a lot of jokes were played on Scott, especially by Dean. Did Scott ever get Dean back?
What? I've been, I was around so many things that I can't remember any specific one, but...
I heard a story about golf balls.
You mean where they filled his car up with golf balls?
No, tell us.
I didn't see that, but I heard that somebody had filled his car and topped it on with golf balls.
That's hysterical. Can you imagine when he opened the door?
wired Scott's brake to his horn. So until he stepped on the brake, he got the horn. I thought that was the best one I heard. They were all sitting around the set waiting for him to leave, because he normally just finishes and leaves, but he took an hour and a half and showered, and so they're all waiting for an hour and a half just to see the payoff. And that was after he had hobbled himself a couple of days before, so he was on crutches. We were, like on the Vietnam episode, we were just so, it was such an intense set, like it wasted the whole crew, those guys. I worked with Don for 3 months trying to get the episode together to capture the look and the feel of the teams and to get the right weapons. And we used the Stoner machine gun, which the SEALs used exclusively in Vietnam, which through some Pentagon sources I found who had them collected in Florida, and they're still part of Special Ops. So I talked to them, put them in touch with George Tours, and then George promptly called me back, said I talked to these people, and he says, do you have any idea how many licenses it would take to get an automatic weapon out of southern Florida into southern California? Oh. He said the paperwork alone would take 6 months. And he's one of like 4 people in Hollywood who have all the tickets for weapons and demolition stuff. So 2 weeks later, I show up there out at the set, and George takes me over and he opens up the back, and he's got 2 fully set up Stoner automatic weapons. And I started to say something, he says, don't even ask. And then in one of the scenes, Scott trips over it and breaks the handle, and it cost him a couple $1,000 to repair. But they kept, the real ones work fine. But it uses an M16 round. When you use them with blanks, there isn't enough compression to come back to actually make it work well, so it's always jamming, and the director, Michael Zimberg, was cursing it. So if you ever really want to get Michael, just mention Stoner, and he goes into overload.
You know, they caught the guy for it. He was pretty
I have a serious question and a frivolous question. For the ladies on the panel, there's a nice representation of ages and backgrounds here, and I was wondering if you could comment about your experiences in the industry. There's so much press lately about the difficulties of women in the business. But before you answer that, the frivolous question, for those of us struggling single men, what is it particularly about the way that Scott kisses?
The leads against him, that's what caught my interest.
Well, you know, it's one of those things that's a little difficult to describe. What makes Scott a good kisser? I think, certainly what I had fun with. Actually, he was so nervous to kiss me. I just had a blast with that. I was like, you know, like I said, right, let me at it. Because he was so shy and so nervous, but you know, when he closed his eyes, I couldn't hit anyone. So, I guess he, it's all in the lip action.
But I subscribe to the theory that all cats are not gray in the dark. He has soft lips.
He's a good kisser. Why he's a good kisser? And the other thing is, as far as the more serious question, I think that women have a difficult time in this business, period. And I think
I wish it was getting better. I wish I could say I think it's getting better, but I don't know that it is. You still see men that are old enough to be my father many, many times with women that are a lot younger than I am. I don't know why that is. Carolyn? Oh, anyone?
No! Don't get me started. I mean, I don't think there's enough time. It's a chauvinistic workplace. I mean, it's not written. The parts really aren't written for women of substance. There are very few roles for women of substance, and my thing is you know, by the year to whatever it's going to be, there's going to be 52% of women over 50. That means that 52% of all women, 52% of the population are going to be women over 50 who are going to be sitting there watching TV. I know that I get very angry when I sit there and I watch a man. I played, the men that I have played the lovers to on screen have been, I've either been the rapacious older woman deflowering all these young men, or I've been the sort of throwaway one, you know, the one who's old and past it, dried up, and let's get rid of her. And it portrays women in such an awful way. And I don't see any reason why women should not be portrayed as still sexy and intelligent and women of substance in their 50s, because God knows that's what this country's going to be about. The other day and saying, you know, I was just, you know, looking around for representation, and she said to me, this is a woman who's known me for a long time, and I said, you know, it's going to be hard, isn't it? And she said, well, you know, we have 4 women, as you say, 200 plus. We have 4 women who are in your age range. Darling, we can't take you on. I mean, there's only 3 lines for them to play every year, so what are we going to do with you? And I work in my age range, but it's always, one always spends this sort of, there's always that initial thing. I look in the mirror, I get into the makeup truck, and my initial thought is, oh God, you know, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, everything's still sort of hanging down there. And, you know, I have to sort of, you know, get my old blood moving, and then it's sort of, and then they do their magic, and one feels better. But I mean, it's such a shame to look in the mirror and for one's first thought to be, looking a little old. Instead of celebrating the fact that I have this wisdom behind me and I am a woman of a certain age. It's unforgivable. It's the new country.
I think that there's sort of an idea in this town that nobody wants to see women over a certain age. And I think that if there were more parts written for women over a certain age, that maybe this town would cotton on to the fact that we are pretty interesting. So,
you know, we are often in the position of not having power, and I've just been thinking about this week. I have to say someone else's words, and I have to be someone else's character. And I just realized that we have power and we have influence. I have a stack of postcards on my television, and when I see something that I think is lovely, I write. And I'll write to maybe the producers, or you can even write to the FCC or whatever and say, I like this. And you know, every time someone writes, it counts as 500 opinions. And so instead of sitting back and saying, well, you know, these shows aren't so great, and I don't like the values that they're portraying, and I don't like the way that they're treating women or people of color, you know, and I'm kind of a I don't like to fight or be criticized or criticize other people. So I would rather be constructive in my approach. You know, if I see something that I like, all you have to do is say so. And that opinion counts. And you all are why we're here. And your opinions count, and you can make it happen. And please do.
Seems like sometimes, though, the roles go to a gentleman with a good body who's wearing dresses. Now you have to fight against that, sure. Richard, would you wear a dress when you...
Sure. Bring it on. Well, I was going to amplify or actually support her point in that the networks do respond to the fans and the viewers, as you guys know, because it was the fans of Quantum Leap that kept this show on for the last, 3 years? And almost one more year. It was down to the wire before we didn't know. The realities of the business are they write you off no matter what it is, writing, except producing. But in the writing and acting areas, they seem to write you off once you reach 40. And that's for men as well. Hollywood's not an easy place, but hopefully as we send out messages to them to say we're looking for broader things, we'll see more of the kind of programming that we write. Does that help? Yeah. But I went to, I came out here real brief. I came out here 3 years ago, mostly to get into producing, not so much to do acting, but I wanted to get into writing producing. And so I came out and I was pitching, and I pitched at the networks and at the major studios. And I was absolutely shocked because I'd go in, here's the head of TV drama development, and he would be like 29 years old. I expected somebody like Gray in their 80s that, you'd have to wait until somebody dies off to move into position. And I thought, well, maybe that's just this one place. I was MCA first. And then when I went over to Warner, it was the same thing. When I went, it was just... And they don't think that you have anything worthwhile to say because the typical viewing audience, quote by the Nielsen ratings, is like 19 to 35. So if you're over that, you don't know what they're going to. You can't feel their pain. Yeah. So there's a lot of that permeates the Hollywood, but I think it's changing.
But a friend of mine just wrote a pilot and took it to the networks, and they have a track record, and the storyline they all found fascinating until they read it. And this guy looked and said, "I absolutely love this," and I tell you, it's an absolute go. The thing is that we'll change the 4 women from being 45 up to 50. We'll change them to being 20, and then we crush. So, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Hi, this question is for Lila Olsen. I was just wondering, we heard from the rest of the panel what they're up to. I was wondering what you're doing lately in your career.
Oh, let's see. This week has been mad. We're in pilot season, and I don't know about you all, but I've been in auditions and changing in my car and changing in everyone's bathroom. And actually, I read for Scott's new pilot. So projects, and I don't want to jinx, but say your prayers. And I just completed an episode of Lois and Clark. That was a lot of fun. I play a ninja, and then, yeah, me. And halfway through the show, I take off my mask, and everyone's shocked that it's this little girl who was doing all those naughty things. So it was a lot of fun to do, and learned how Superman flies on wires. Isn't it sad? I love it too.
To all the panel, is there a particular role that you really, really would like to do? Theater or screen or television?
As an actor, you're looking for a scene at least I like looking for something that it challenges me emotionally. I used to look for that. Something that has a good message to it, isn't just yelling just for the sake of yelling. That there's a lot of subtext to it. And so I look for good writing, good characters, something that's going to make me really work at it. That's what I know.
Recently I read a script about these two women that were, one of them was involved with the mob, and they conspire together, and they sort of take the mob for everything that they're worth. And it was a really cleverly written script for two women. It was sort of like a Thelma and Louise married to the mob.
Do they live?
They live, and they really, well, it's kind of Thelma and Louise married to the mob, Reservoir Dogs. Like that. But, and it was marvelously written. It was written by two men that are brothers, and they're just about to direct it. So I would like to play something like that. What I'm starting to see, and this is very recently, is really intelligent women parts, and I love that.
I've waited all of my life to play character ladies that had grit and humor and a lot of juice and a lot of style. And now that I'm here, I'm doing it. But I had always wanted to play Madame Arcady and like Spirit, things of that nature, you know. Yeah. So I'm getting to do the things that I've always wanted to do. So that's good.
I mean, there aren't any parts anymore that I yearn to play. I mean, when I was younger, I wanted to get to this age and then start playing all the big beefy sort of Shakespearean stuff. And the thing is that I've decided now that I want to more than anything make people laugh, actually, rather more than sit there and weep and cry. And if by virtue of the fact that the character that I portray moves people, then that's enough for me. You know, it's